to Deep Sleep Stories. Thank you to everyone who's been listening. If these stories help you relax or fall asleep, a short review, comment, or sharing the podcast with someone who might benefit is a simple and meaningful way to support the show so that we may continue to offer it for free. Now, take a slow, gentle breath and let's begin tonight's story.
Welcome and settle in with Deep Sleep Stories, where the day can gently loosen its grip and drift away. Tonight you'll be carried to a stormy night at Rainfall Inn, a warm, lantern-lit refuge where rain sings on the roof and every room holds a quiet comfort. Take a moment to notice how you are resting right now. Let your shoulders soften. Let your jaw unclench. If it feels good, allow your eyelids to grow heavy, as though they've been waiting all day for permission to close. Breathe in slowly, as if you're sipping calm air through a straw, and breathe out like a long sigh that empties a little worry from your chest. Again, a gentle inhale and an even gentler exhale. There's nowhere else you need to be, nothing you need to solve. Just this moment and the soothing rhythm of a story that asks nothing from you. Imagine cool night air beyond a window, the kind that smells like clean stone and wet leaves. Imagine the steady hush of rainfall, layered with the distant rumble of thunder that never feels too close. Let those sounds become a blanket for your mind, soft and safe. And as your breathing finds its own slow pace, the story begins to unfold, not around you, but beside you, like a quiet lamp lit in the corner of a cozy room. Rain fell in ribbons that night, threading down from a low charcoal sky to the valley below. It washed the cobblestones until they shone. It darkened the bark of trees until they looked polished. It beaded on fern fronds and gathered in little silver pockets along every leaf. At the edge of the valley, where the road curved between two old stone walls, a sign creaked softly on iron chains. The sign bore a simple carving of falling rain, tiny lines etched in wood, and beneath it in letters worn smooth by weather and time, the name Rainfall Inn. The inn had been there longer than most could remember, not in the grand, famous way of castles or cathedrals, but in the steady way of things that keep their promises. It was the kind of place travelers found when they needed warmth, and the kind of place locals spoke about as if it were a person, reliable, comforting, quietly wise. Its windows glowed honey gold against the storm. Lanterns hung under the eaves, each one shielded by a little hood of copper that turned the candlelight downward, so it pooled on the doorstep. The roof was steep and shingled, built to welcome rain and guide it neatly into gutters that fed a stone channel. Water rushed through that channel in a constant, lively stream, slipping toward a garden where thirsty herbs and mossy stones drank their fill. Inside, the air was warm enough to make cheeks feel gently flushed, and it smelled of cedar, beeswax, and a pot of something soothing steeping near the hearth. A traveler arrived just as the wind stirred a new song through the trees. He was not young, not old, simply someone whose face had learned the soft lines of quiet observation. His cloak was dark with wet, and beads of rain clung to his lashes. He paused under the eaves, listening for a breath, as though checking that this place truly existed and wasn't only a hopeful thought brought on by the storm. Then he stepped forward and lifted the latch. The door opened with a friendly sigh, and warmth wrapped around him like a shawl. A bell chimed above the frame, light, bright, and a little musical, announcing his arrival without any urgency. He stood just inside, letting the rainwater drip from his cloak onto the woven mat, and the room welcomed him with a hush that felt reverent rather than silent. The common room was shaped like a gentle embrace. Wooden beams arched overhead, darkened by age and lovingly polished. A wide hearth crackled with a low fire, not roaring, just steady, flames moving like slow dancers behind a black iron grate. Lamps glowed in niches along the walls, and candles rested in glass holders, their flames steady despite the storm. There were chairs that looked as though they had been chosen for comfort rather than show. A long table made of oak held bowls of apples and pears, their skins glossy. In the corner, a shelf of books leaned slightly as if the stories themselves had settled into a relaxed posture, and by the hearth, on a thick rug, a cat slept in a loose curl, whiskers twitching once as the door closed, then settling again. From behind a wooden counter came a gentle voice. Come in," said the innkeeper, as if inviting the traveler into a home rather than a business. "The storm is making a fuss tonight." The innkeeper was a person with kind hands and calm eyes, wearing a simple apron and a soft smile. Their hair, silvered in places like moonlight, caught in dark clouds, was tied back neatly. They held a towel as though it had been waiting for the exact moment it would be needed. The traveler nodded, and the innkeeper lifted the towel in an offering. "Dry your hands," they said, "and your worries too, if they'll come off so easily." The traveler let out a quiet breath that might have been a laugh, or might have been relief. He took the towel and rubbed his hands, then brushed at the damp edge of his cloak. Thunder murmured in the distance, low and unhurried, and the windows trembled ever so slightly, not with fear, but with the simple acknowledgement of weather being weather. "I wasn't sure the inn would be open in a storm like this," the traveler admitted. "It's open especially in storms," the innkeeper replied. "Storms are when people need a roof and a fire and something warm in a cup." As if on cue, a fragrant steam drifted up from a kettle near the hearth. The traveler breathed it in and felt something inside him soften, a knot loosening, a tension slipping away. The innkeeper gestured to a chair by the fire. "Sit. Warm up. I'll bring you something that tastes like the feeling of coming home." The traveler did as he was told, easing into a deep chair whose cushions seemed to remember every person who had ever rested there. The chair cradled him without swallowing him, and he leaned back, letting the fire paint warmth along his damp sleeves. Rain tapped the windows, not harshly but persistently, like fingertips drumming a gentle rhythm. The innkeeper moved with calm efficiency, filling a mug with a dark amber brew that smelled of chamomile, honey, and something faintly floral, perhaps lavender, perhaps the memory of summer tucked into dried petals. They placed it in the traveler's hands with a small plate of bread still warm from the oven, spread with butter that melted at the edges. "Slow," the innkeeper said, as if giving advice that applied to everything. "This weather is best met slowly." The traveler wrapped his fingers around the mug. The heat traveled into his palms and up his arms, settling into his shoulders. He took a sip. The taste was gentle and familiar, even if he couldn't have named the ingredients. It was comfort, turned into warmth. Around the room, a few other guests lingered in peaceful silence. A couple sat near the far wall, heads close together over a chessboard, their moves unhurried. An older woman knitted with pale yarn, her needles clicking softly, like rain on thin leaves. A young person sat by the bookshelf, reading with their feet tucked under them, eyes calm. No one looked up in alarm at the thunder. It was simply part of the evening's soundtrack. The traveler felt something he hadn't realized he'd been missing. The sense that he did not have to perform, did not have to rush, did not have to be anything other than someone warming his hands by a fire. The innkeeper returned to the counter, polishing a glass with small circular motions. The cat by the hearth opened one eye, regarded the traveler with mild curiosity, and then decided he was safe enough to ignore. Outside, the storm deepened. Wind pushed rain against the building in soft waves. Somewhere along the roofline, a chain of water spilled into the stone channel with a pleasing rush, like a tiny river delighted by its own importance. The traveler listened, and as he listened, he began to notice something curious. Beneath the rain and the thunder, beneath the crackle of fire and the quiet conversation of the room, there was another sound, a low, melodic hum, almost like distant singing, almost like a flute played far away. He tilted his head slightly, trying to locate it. The innkeeper noticed, because innkeepers notice everything without making it feel like they do. "You hear it?" they said, not a question. The traveler nodded. "What is it?" The innkeeper's smile turned a little mysterious, the way candlelight looks behind frosted glass. "That," they said, "is the inn listening to the rain." The traveler blinked, uncertain if this was a joke or a local saying or something else entirely. The innkeeper did not rush to explain. They simply let the words settle like a blanket. "It's an old building," the innkeeper went on at last, voice low and soothing. "It has had a long time to learn the language of weather. When the rain is heavy, the inn remembers." "Remembers what?" the traveler asked, though his voice was already softer, as if the warmth in the room had melted sharpness from his thoughts. The innkeeper set the glass down and leaned lightly on the counter. "Stories," they said. "Mostly quiet ones. Nothing that needs solving, just echoes of travelers who once came in from storms and the comfort they found here." The inn keeps them the way wood keeps warmth. The traveler looked around, suddenly seeing the beams, the stones, the floorboards with new eyes. They seemed sturdy, yes, but also tender, as if they cared. He took another sip of his tea, and the humming sound seemed to deepen, becoming more distinct. It was still subtle, like a song you could only hear if you weren't trying too hard. The older woman knitting smiled faintly without looking up, as if she too had heard it and found it pleasant. The traveler's eyelids began to feel heavy, not with sleep yet, but with a gentle calm. The storm had chased him here, and the inn had caught him. The innkeeper set a key on the counter, its metal worn smooth. "You'll want a room?" they said, as though it were obvious. Upstairs, the last door on the left, it's quietest there. The rain sounds like a lullaby from that window. The traveler hesitated only a moment, not because he doubted the room, but because he didn't want to leave the fire. Yet the thought of a bed, of blankets, of a space where he could let go completely was irresistible. He finished his tea slowly, letting each sip be a small act of surrender, and stood. The cat, uncurling by the hearth, stretched luxuriously, spine arching, paws reaching. It yawned, showing tiny teeth, then hopped down from the rug with the unhurried grace of a creature that knows it belongs. It walked toward the stairs as if it had decided to escort him. The traveler gathered his cloak and nodded his thanks to the innkeeper. "Rest well," the innkeeper said, "and if the storm wakes you, don't fight it. Let it pass through the night, like a thought that doesn't need your attention." The traveler climbed the stairs, and the inn shifted around him in a way that felt like a sigh. The steps were broad, each one slightly hollowed from countless feet over the years. The banister was warm beneath his hand, as though the wood had been holding on to heat for him. Upstairs, the hallway was lined with doors, each with a small brass plate and a candle bracket beside it. The air smelled faintly of lavender and clean linen. A window at the far end revealed the night. Rain streaking down glass. Darkness beyond. The occasional pale flash of lightning far off, illuminating the outlines of trees like quick sketches. The cat patted ahead, tail lifted like a small flag, and stopped at the last door on the left. It looked back at the traveler as if to say, "Here." The traveler inserted the key and opened the door. The room was simple and therefore perfect. A bed with a thick quilt in muted blues and grays sat beneath a slanted ceiling. A small table held a candle in a glass holder and a bowl of dried herbs. A chair stood near the window, draped with a wool blanket. In one corner, a pitcher of water and a basin waited politely. A rug covered the floorboards, soft underfoot. The window, as promised, was a painter of lullabies. Rain tapped the glass in gentle patterns, sometimes quick, sometimes slow, always rhythmic. Wind pushed the sound into waves, so it rose and fell like a breathing sea. The cat hopped onto the chair, circled once, and settled down, curling into itself with the ease of practiced comfort. Its presence turned the room from a guest room into a sanctuary. The traveler closed the door and stood for a moment, simply listening. The humming sound from downstairs was still there, faint but present, threaded through the rain. It was as if the inn's heart beat softly in the walls. He removed his cloak, hanging it on a peg by the door. Dampness fell away from him in 1,000 tiny droplets, leaving him lighter. He sat on the edge of the bed and pressed a palm into the quilt. It was warm, as if it had been waiting. He glanced toward the candle, considering whether to light it, but decided against it. The room didn't need more light. The storm outside provided its own now and then. A soft flash, a momentary silvering of the world. The traveler lay down fully clothed for a moment just to feel the mattress accept him. The bed seemed to hold him the way moss holds a stone, gently, patiently. Outside thunder rolled again, but it was distant, like a drum played in another valley. It did not demand attention. It simply existed, adding depth to the night. The traveler's thoughts drifted, as thoughts do when there is nothing sharp to hook them. He remembered roads. He remembered mornings. He remembered the way his feet had moved almost automatically for days. And then he remembered, with a soft gratitude, that he did not have to move now. He took a slow breath in and let it out. The sound of the rain felt like breathing too. Inhale, exhale, steady and endless. The cat lifted its head slightly, eyes half open, and made a quiet, contented sound. Not quite a purr, not quite a sigh, something in between. Then it rested its chin on its paws. Downstairs, the innkeeper moved through their closing rituals. They banked the fire so it would last through the night, glowing softly like embers beneath ash. They checked the locks, not because danger was near, but because routine is comforting. They wiped the tables and set the chairs neatly, creating order that felt like another kind of warmth. They paused by the bookshelf, straightening one leaning volume and letting their fingers rest on its spine for a moment, as if greeting an old friend. In the kitchen, they set out a loaf of dough to rise slowly, covered with a cloth. They filled a jar with oats and placed it on the counter where morning hands would find it easily. They laid out mugs, each one different, each one familiar. Then they turned their attention to something most guests never noticed: a narrow door at the back of the common room, half hidden behind a tapestry that showed a waterfall spilling into a moonlit pool. Behind that door, a small staircase wound down into a space beneath the inn. It was not a basement for storage, not quite. It was an old room of stone, cool and quiet, where rainwater ran through channels carved long ago. The innkeeper descended carrying a lantern. The light revealed smooth stones glistening with moisture. Water moved through shallow grooves, guided carefully, flowing with a soft, constant murmur. The air was cool and smelled of wet earth, like the moment after a garden has been watered. In the center of the room stood an old, peculiar instrument, a wheel made of wood and metal, turned by the flow of water. Attached to it were thin pipes and hollow reeds, each tuned to a slightly different note. As the wheel turned, it brushed against the reeds, and they sang. That was the humming the traveler had heard. The innkeeper watched the wheel for a moment, making sure it turned smoothly. They listened, head tilted, not unlike the traveler earlier. Easy tonight, they murmured as though speaking to the inn itself. Sing softly, let them rest. And as if the inn understood, the song seemed to mellow, the notes becoming rounder, more distant, like a lullaby heard through a wall. The innkeeper adjusted a small lever, changing the water's path so it flowed more gently. The wheel slowed slightly, and the reeds sighed rather than rang. Satisfied, the innkeeper extinguished the lantern and climbed back upstairs, leaving the water to do its quiet work. Above, the common room now rested in dimness. The embers in the hearth glowed. The candles were out. The rain painted the windows with moving patterns, and the sign outside swayed, creaking softly like a cradle rocking. In the traveler's room, the air grew even calmer. He had changed into a soft shirt the inn provided, folded neatly at the foot of the bed, as though placed there by invisible hands. He had washed his face with cool water from the pitcher, wiping away the dust of travel and, with it, the last bits of the day's strain. Now he lay beneath the quilt, the fabric heavy enough to feel secure, light enough to breathe under. The room's darkness was kind, not empty. It held the shapes of furniture like gentle silhouettes. The window was a shifting canvas of rain. He listened again for the humming song. It was there, but so faint now, it felt like his own imagination joining with the inn. He did not try to separate the two. He let it be. As the minutes passed, the storm outside began to change. Rain that had been loud and insistent softened to a steadier, smoother fall. The wind that had been gusting in bursts found a slower rhythm, like a tired animal settling down. Thunder became less frequent, farther away, rolling like a distant cart on a road. The traveler's breathing deepened. His mind, which had carried maps and plans and worries, began to unburden itself. Thoughts floated up one by one and drifted away without needing attention. The inn did not ask him to think. The rain did not ask him to respond. The night did not demand any performance. Somewhere, faintly, a clock ticked. Not loud, not sharp, just a small reminder that time was passing in a patient way. The traveler imagined the inn as a living thing, not in any frightening sense, but in the way a tree feels alive. It had roots in the valley, deep into the damp earth. It had a trunk of stone and timber. It had branches made of hallways and rooms, reaching out to hold people. And like a tree, it listened. It listened to rain. It listened to thunder. It listened to the slow, soft exhale of a person finally safe enough to sleep. In the room across the hall, a guest turned over once, settling more comfortably. The floorboards did not creak in complaint. They creaked in acknowledgement, like a whisper. Rest. cat in the traveler's chair adjusted its position, curling tighter, and began to purr at last. A low, steady sound that blended perfectly with rainfall. The traveler's eyelids fluttered, heavier and heavier. His face softened. The small muscles around his eyes released, as if they had been holding tension all day without him noticing. Downstairs, the innkeeper sat for a moment in a chair by the banked fire. They held a mug of their own tea, cradling it, not because they needed heat, but because it felt good. Through the dim room, they listened to the storm's quieter voice. They thought of all the nights Rainfall Inn had stood here, welcoming weather, welcoming weary feet. They thought of all the people who had arrived with soaked cloaks and hurried hearts, and left with rested eyes and slower steps. And they felt, as they often did, that there was a gentle kind of magic in simple things: a dry towel offered at the door, a warm mug placed in waiting hands, a quilt pulled up to the chin. Outside, rain continued its steady work, washing the world clean. In the valley, the stream swelled with fresh water and sang over stones. Trees drank deeply, their roots satisfied. The garden behind the inn glistened, every leaf holding a droplet like a tiny lantern. Farther away, in the dark fields, grasses bowed under rain and rose again, bowing and rising in a slow, endless dance. The storm was not a threat. It was a lullaby for the land. In the traveler's room, the rain on the window became the main melody, and everything else softened to accompaniment. The faint hum of the water wheel's reeds, the purr of the cat, the whisper of wind along the eaves. The traveler's thoughts drifted into gentle images. He imagined a lantern swinging on a porch, its light steady in the rain. He imagined a cup warming cold hands. He imagined the inn's beams absorbing the sound of thunder and turning it into something harmless, like a drum heard through thick curtains. And in those imaginings, his mind began to step sideways, away from waking, toward dreams. The inn, for its part, continued to do what it did best. It held warmth in its walls. It kept the storm at a respectful distance. It sang quietly through hidden reeds and flowing water. It offered rooms that felt like nests. It encouraged sleep without insisting upon it. Hours passed in a way that did not feel like hours. The storm outside eased again, rain thinning for a while into a fine mist, then returning in gentle pulses. The wind calmed. Thunder faded almost entirely, becoming a memory. A hush settled over the valley, not silence, but a softer layer of sound. Rain's delicate tapping, water's murmuring flow, the occasional drip from an overhanging branch. The traveler lay very still now, breath slow and deep. The quilt rose and fell. The room seemed to breathe with him, each inhale and exhale mirrored by the rhythm of water outside. The cat's purr continued, steady as a heart. Downstairs, the innkeeper finally rose and moved towards their own small room behind the kitchen. They paused in the hallway, listening. They could always tell when the house was fully at rest. It was a feeling, a settling, like dust falling after a door closes. They smiled to themselves in the dark. Good, they whispered, though no one needed to hear it. Everyone is safe. They went to bed, and the inn held them too. The water wheel turned slowly beneath the floor, reeds sighing their lullaby. The rain whispered on shingles. The sign outside creaked once, then grew still. And the night, having done its stormy work, began to soften toward morning. Still dark, still cool, but gentler, as if the sky itself had relaxed. In the traveler's room, the world narrowed to a few simple sensations. Warmth on skin, softness beneath the body, a steady sound of rain. Nothing else was required. The rain's rhythm slowed the mind the way a rocking chair slows the heart. The inn's quiet song wrapped around the edges of thought. The cat's purr smoothed any lingering sharpness. Soon, even the idea of traveling felt far away, like a story told long ago. Only rest remained. And now the story itself begins to quiet too, as though it doesn't want to disturb the peace it has created. The images grow softer, the sentences become gentler, like footsteps retreating down a hallway. Rainfall Inn continues to glow in the storm's shadow, a warm pocket of light in a dark valley. The traveler sleeps. The cat sleeps. The inn sleeps, listening, humming, holding, breathing in and breathing out. The night keeps rocking, slow and steady. If any thought drifts by, it can drift on. There is no need to follow it. Let it pass like a cloud crossing a moon. The rain is only rain. The thunder is only thunder, now far away. The bed is steady beneath him, the quilt heavy in a comforting way. The room safe and quiet. The inn's song is faint, barely there, like a lullaby, remembered rather than heard. Everything is easing. Everything is softening. And you can soften too, letting your body sink a little deeper into rest, letting your breathing slow until it feels effortless. The storm outside has become a gentle whisper. The warmth inside remains. Good night, dear traveler. Sleep well.